Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Some stories aren't told in daylight. They live in the quiet, between raindrops on a tin roof. Between a glance held too long and a word never said. Tonight, I want to tell you one of those stories. It begins in a crumbling farmhouse at the edge of a forgotten Louisiana town. A woman lives there, Marla. Quiet, weathered, alone, until one night, a motorcycle hums down her gravel road, and with it comes a boy she hasn't seen in years. Her sister's son, soaked in rain and secrets. What unfolds from there isn't simple. It isn't clean, but it's real, and it asks a question few dare to answer. What happens when comfort walks the edge of forbidden? When loneliness starts to feel like love? This is not a story for everyone. But if you've ever felt the ache of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years, then maybe, just maybe, this story is for you. Settle in, listen close, because some silences speak louder than words. Marla was in her mid-30s, long divorced, long quiet. She lived alone now in the crumbling farmhouse her grandparents had left behind on the edge of a sleepy Louisiana town where nothing happened except the weather. The summer had come early that year, and with it, heavy rains that pelted the tin roof, filling her days with damp silence and the low hum of loneliness. Then one evening, a motorcycle rumbled down the gravel road and stopped at her gate. It was Jeremy, her sister's boy, soaked shirt clinging to his back, backpack slung over one shoulder, and a look in his eyes that said he'd run too far to turn back now. "Aunt Marla," he said, voice catching like a twig in wind. "Can I stay here a few days?" She nodded, barely speaking. Jeremy's mother, her sister, was always strict, always controlling. She had forced him into pre-med, into expectations, into pressure he couldn't breathe under. So he left, and he came here, where it was quiet, where Marla never asked anything of anyone. That first night, she laid out an old blanket for him on the living room floor, offered him a fan, a pillow that had lost its shape, and told him to rest. The only sounds were the click of the fan and the ragged breath of two people who hadn't shared a roof in years, blood kin but strangers still. Bound now by the shared ache of wanting out, Jeremy asked softly in the dark, "Aren't you worried what people might say?" Marla didn't turn around. "Worry and don't change a damn thing," she said. "Sleep. I'll fix breakfast in the morning." Outside, the rain tapped against the tin like fingers on glass. Inside, something shifted, too quietly to name, too early to fear. Over the next few days, Jeremy stayed. He helped Marla weed the front yard, patch the chicken coop behind the shed, and gather the old fallen branches that littered the back pasture. At noon, they sat side by side on the porch eating rice and beans, sipping sweet tea, and sharing silence more than words. "I'm sorry for barging in," he said once, eyes on his plate. "Didn't mean to mess up your quiet." "You didn't," she said. "It's less lonely with someone to cook for." That night, thunder rolled in again. The roof groaned and leaked at the corners. One fat drop fell right onto Jeremy's sleeping mat. Marla, still in her nightshirt, brought him a thicker quilt. She stood over him, watching his chest rise and fall under the covers. "Come lie down up here, Aunt Marla," he said, voice low, a little hoarse from sleep. "The floor's too cold. You'll catch something." She hesitated, standing barefoot on the creaky wood floor, then sat on the edge of the bed. Just for a moment, the storm masked every sound. They didn't speak, but when Jeremy's hand touched hers, just a light press, barely there, she didn't move. And when he whispered, "Don't be scared," she still said nothing. It wasn't the touch that frightened her. It was what she didn't push away. Their shadows overlapped on the paint-peeled wall, blurry, uneven, unsure where one ended and the other began. After that night, Marla avoided his gaze. She busied herself with chores, always turning her face when he entered a room. But Jeremy watched her differently now, with a gaze that had grown quiet. Older somehow, but never forceful. It wasn't about seduction. It was something far more dangerous. Comfort. One evening, as she sat outside brushing her wet hair beneath the porch light, he came up behind her. "You want me to go?" he asked. His voice cracked like the screen door in the wind. Marla didn't answer. Her hair hung long and damp across her back, the scent of lavender and old pine wood rising from her skin. "I'll stay," he said, "if you want me to." She felt his fingers gently lift a loose strand of hair. His hand brushed the back of her neck. "Don't," she whispered, but she didn't move. The wind rattled the banana leaves behind the shed. A cicada cried, and inside her chest, a terrible ache bloomed, not of fear, but of knowing where this path led. It wasn't right, it wasn't clean, but it was warm, and she hadn't been warm in years. The next morning, Marla was up before dawn. She stood barefoot in the kitchen, stoking the fire under the old stovetop, listening to the faint popping of wood and the soft scratch of wind against the siding. The coffee pot hissed and steamed. A bowl of grits sat waiting, but her thoughts weren't on breakfast. They were stuck in the warmth that had lingered from the night before, Jeremy's fingers brushing her neck, his breath barely grazing her skin, and the quiet storm between them that no one dared name. She stared at the wooden door, half hoping he wouldn't walk through it, half hoping he would. His footsteps arrived like clockwork. Slow, careful, he stood behind her, just long enough for her to feel it. "Let me cook," he said. "You sit a while." She didn't speak, just handed him the wooden spoon and stepped aside. His hands were clumsy but eager, unfamiliar with the weight of a cast iron pan, but full of quiet effort. They ate together at the table, him scooping eggs onto her plate, her pouring him the last of the coffee. It could have looked like any morning in any house, except it wasn't. That afternoon, she washed the laundry and hung it on the line behind the house. The sun caught in her wet hair again. Jeremy watched her from a few feet away, pretending to be busy with the chicken wire. She didn't need to look to know he was watching. She could feel it, like the sun itself. "Aunt Marla," he said, approaching slowly, "you don't have to do all this alone. I've always done it alone." She replied without turning. "Doesn't mean you should." He reached for the damp shirt in her hands, his fingers wrapping light over hers. Water trickled down their wrists and dripped onto the packed dirt below. "I'm not afraid of hard work," he said. "I just don't want to see you worn down." She looked down at their hands, hers weathered and calloused, his soft but strong. Then she pulled away, not angrily, just enough to keep breathing. That night, there was no rain, just dry winds sliding through the trees and slipping under the windowsills. Marla lay restless in her bed, sheets clinging to her skin. She could hear Jeremy's soft cough from the other room, hear the shift of fabric when he turned over. And then, like a whisper, "Aunt Marla, you awake?" She didn't answer, but she didn't lock the door either. A few moments later, the door creaked open. His figure appeared in the moonlight, tall, hesitant, too young and too old all at once. "Go back to bed," she said softly, turning her face to the wall. "I can't sleep," he said. "You can't either. Can you?" She didn't respond. Jeremy sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to touch her. "I won't do anything. I just want to lie here. That's all." She could have told him no, should have, but instead, she let the blanket fall away from the edge of the mattress. And he slid in beside her. His breath was warm on the back of her neck. His hand didn't move, just hovered, then gently settled along her spine, tracing the curve of years no one else had ever cared to feel. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She closed her eyes. She didn't say a word, because in that moment, sorry didn't matter. Only the silence did, and how they filled it. By the time morning light filtered through the blinds, Jeremy was already gone from her bed. Marla sat up slowly, unsure if it had all been a dream. But the faint dip on the mattress, the warmth still trapped in the sheets, said otherwise. She found him in the backyard, stacking kindling by the shed, shirt damp with sweat, hair tousled from the humidity. When he saw her, he smiled, a quiet, boyish thing that made her chest ache. He walked past her into the kitchen and returned with a steaming bowl. "I made oatmeal," he said, placing it gently in front of her. "You should eat." Marla looked down at the spoon. Her hand trembled. "You didn't have to." "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." She didn't look him in the eye. Couldn't. There was a gravity building between them, slow but undeniable. Not a storm, something heavier, like earth shifting underfoot, like the realization that whatever line they'd been walking had already blurred. Later that afternoon, as Marla hung more clothes on the line, Jeremy stood just beyond the garden watching her. The sun made the sweat glisten on her neck. Her blouse clung to her back. She felt him watching, but said nothing. "Aunt Marla," he called, voice low, "let me do that. You'll ruin your hands," she said with a dry laugh. "I don't care." He approached and gently took the wet shirt from her grip. Their hands brushed. Water ran down between their fingers. "I don't want you to get tired," he said. "I just want to help." She stepped back, not far, just enough to steady herself. That evening, the wind returned. No rain, just the hum of insects and the whisper of dusk through the cracked windows. Marla tossed in bed again, listening to the creaks of the house and the slow ache of time crawling forward. And then came the soft knock on her bedroom door. "Are you asleep?" Jeremy asked. She said nothing, but she didn't stop him when the door eased open. He stepped inside, not boldly, just present. He stood at the foot of the bed for a long moment before sitting beside her. "I can go if you want me to," he said, "but I don't want to." She turned her face away, blanket pulled to her chest. "I'm scared, Jeremy." "I know," he whispered, Me too. I don't know how we got here. I do, he said. It was loneliness. His hand found hers beneath the covers. She didn't pull away. Her breath trembled. I'm not trying to take anything from you. He whispered, I need you to know that you don't have to be alone anymore. She turned to face him. Their foreheads nearly touched. You're still just a boy, and you're the first person who ever saw me. The words landed like stones in water, rippling through the space between them until everything else faded. She should have told him to go, but instead, she stayed still, letting his hand wrap around hers, letting the night carry them into whatever came next. The next morning came with no storm, just a deep, sticky heat that clung to everything. Marla sat on the porch, brushing her damp hair out beneath the rising sun, her eyes fixed on the long, empty road leading to nowhere. Jeremy had woken early again. She heard him moving around, heard the back door creak open, heard the soft scuff of his boots through the yard, but he hadn't said anything. Neither had she. That was how it had to be now. Words would only make it heavier. He returned near noon, arms full of chopped wood, sweat streaming down his temple. He dropped the load beside the shed and made his way to her with quiet determination. I'll heat some water, he said. You should rest. I'm fine. Jeremy didn't argue. He just sat beside her, close enough for his knee to graze hers. You ever think about leaving this place? He asked after a long pause. Marla didn't answer right away. Sometimes. Where would you go? She shrugged. Nowhere in particular. I'd go wherever you went. She turned toward him slowly, her eyes unreadable. Don't say things like that, she whispered. Why not? Because you don't mean it. I do, he said, and placed his hand on hers. I mean every word. That night, the wind came back, dry and restless. The kind of wind that scratched the windows and stirred up ghosts in the walls. Marla couldn't sleep. Neither could Jeremy. She heard his footsteps outside her door before the knock even came. Marla? Not Aunt Marla. Just her name. Her breath caught. The door creaked open. He stepped in slowly, his silhouette filling the doorway. He didn't speak, just walked toward her and sat beside her on the edge of the bed. I'm not asking for anything, he said. I just want to be near you. Her hand trembled slightly as she pulled the blanket back. Jeremy lay down beside her, his body long and warm, his breath soft against the back of her neck. His arms slipped around her waist. Please don't be afraid, he whispered. I'm not afraid of you, she replied. Then what? I'm afraid of what this makes me. Jeremy pressed his forehead gently to her shoulder. It makes you human. There was a stillness between them after that, a fragile silence full of unspoken longing and dread. Then she turned, just enough to face him. Their faces were inches apart. I shouldn't want this, she whispered. I know, he said, but I do. She didn't close the distance. He did. A kiss, tentative, warm, real, and just like that, whatever boundaries they had clung to, whatever guilt they thought might save them, broke like a thin line of thread. When she woke the next morning, Jeremy was gone again, out in the field, fixing the gate, stacking firewood, doing the things that made it feel like a life. A shared one. He came back in with muddy boots and a bowl of hot grits. I cooked, he said, shyly. She didn't speak, Just picked up the spoon. Eyes glassy, Jeremy sat across from her, rubbing the back of his neck. Eyes red but steady. I'm not leaving, Marla, not unless you make me. You should go, she said, her voice cracked like dry wood. Why? Because they'll find out. They'll say awful things. I don't care what they say. But I do, she whispered. I care what it makes me. Jeremy reached across the table and placed his hand on hers. I only care if you're okay. Marla didn't pull away. Outside, thunder rolled in again. But inside, something else began to smolder. Something neither of them knew how to stop. The storm came fast that afternoon, thick clouds rolling in like a bruise across the sky. Thunder shaking the floorboards under their feet. Marla stood at the sink, rinsing dishes in silence while Jeremy leaned against the doorframe behind her. Arms folded, jaw tight, neither had spoken much since breakfast. Not because there was nothing to say, only because everything that needed saying had become too heavy to name. You really want me to leave? He asked softly. She didn't turn around. It'd be easier if you did. For who? You or the people who'll talk? She dried her hands on a dish towel. For both of us. Jeremy stepped into the room, the thunder echoing just behind him. You think I don't know what this looks like? I know exactly what it looks like, she said, her voice tight, and that's why it has to stop. He moved closer. But what does it feel like, Marla, to you? She faced him now, eyes dark, shoulders tense. It feels like something I've been ashamed of since the moment it started. But it's real. That doesn't make it right. The rain hit the roof hard, drowning out their voices for a moment. Jeremy stepped in front of her. He wasn't the boy who arrived weeks ago, soaked in sweat and uncertainty. He stood taller now. He looked at her differently. He looked at himself differently. You want me gone, he said. Say the word and I'll walk out that door. She opened her mouth, but the words caught somewhere between guilt and longing. I can't, she whispered instead. I can't send you away and pretend nothing happened. Jeremy reached out, fingers brushing her shoulder, then resting on the side of her neck. Then don't pretend. A breath escaped her, part sigh, part sob. She leaned into him, not with abandon, but with surrender, her forehead against his chest, his arms slowly wrapping around her. I don't know how to carry this, she said. I don't know how to be okay with any of it. You don't have to be okay right now, he murmured. Just be honest. With me, with yourself. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, their silence turned into touch. Later that evening, they sat together in the kitchen. She made soup, and he lit the lantern. The power had gone out again, but the small circle of flickering light was enough. Jeremy reached for her hand across the table. I'm going to start looking for work in town, he said. Marla looked up. I can't stay here forever, not like this, not hiding, but I'm not leaving you either. Her lips parted. You mean that? I do. She lowered her gaze, eyes tracing the soft shadows his fingers made against the table. What will people say? They'll say what they want. And your mother? Jeremy hesitated. She'll hate us, probably forever. Marla's heart ached at the thought, but he tightened his grip on her hand. She doesn't get to choose who I am anymore. I do. And just like that, a decision neither of them had wanted to make was slowly being made. Not loud, Not brave, just quietly, between shared meals and flickering oil light and the ache of things they could no longer undo. In the days that followed, Jeremy didn't go anywhere. He fixed the broken fence along the west edge of the property, patched the holes in the chicken coop roof, and began waking early to split kindling before Marla had even rolled out of bed. The neighbors started to notice. Old Mrs. Crawford from across the road came by for tomatoes and left with questions in her eyes. The mailman, usually chatty, grew quiet when Jeremy answered the door, and the boy from the next farm over, barely 17, asked Marla bluntly, "Is that your nephew or your man?" She laughed it off, but the flush in her cheeks lasted long after the conversation ended. Rumors moved fast in towns like this, faster than rainwater through clay soil, and though no one said anything to her face, Marla could feel it in the glances, the long stares at the grocery store, the sudden silences when she passed. Jeremy noticed too, one night, as they sat on the porch watching the moon cast its pale light over the gravel road. He broke the quiet. "I know they're talking." Marla kept her eyes on the yard. "Let them. I'm not ashamed," he said. "You should be," she whispered. He looked at her then. Really looked. "Are you?" Her throat tightened. "I'm scared." Jeremy reached out and touched her hand where it rested on her knee. "I'm not going anywhere, even if you tell me to." "You should go," she said. "Get a job. Start your life. This is my life, right here." She pulled her hand away, but he caught it gently before it could fall. "You said you'd let me stay as long as I wanted. I'm still choosing this. You." Marla's body tensed, torn between impulse and instinct. "You're young," she said. "One day you'll wake up and see this for what it is." "What is it?" he asked. "A mistake. Then it's a mistake I'm not ready to stop making." The air was thick, not with heat, but with that slow burning pressure that comes before a storm. That night, as the wind rose again and the leaves rustled outside the bedroom window, Marla stood at the kitchen stove, stirring a pot of beans. Jeremy entered quietly, his steps softer than usual. He didn't speak, just stood behind her, watching her shoulders move, her hair tied back, a single curl falling down the back of her neck. "You want me to leave?" he said. She didn't turn around. "You should." He took a step closer. "But you don't want me to." Another step. "Close now. I want peace," she said, then stopped running from it. His hands found her arms, gently turned her toward him. Marla looked up into eyes no longer boyish, no longer unsure. "I'm not afraid of the world," Jeremy said, "just afraid of waking up without you in it." She looked down, her heart beat hard in her chest. Then, very quietly, "Don't make promises you'll outgrow." Jeremy leaned forward, his lips brushing her temple. "Then let me grow into them." And that night, in the space between what could not be said and what could no longer be denied, they held each other, not with the hunger of lust, but with the aching desperation of two people clinging to the only warmth they'd ever known. It rained again the next day, one of those long, slow rains that didn't flood the earth but soaked everything through. Jeremy spent the morning sealing the back window with plastic sheeting while Marla sat at the kitchen table, listening to the steady rhythm of drops on the roof. Her fingers traced the rim of a coffee mug gone cold. When Jeremy came back in, damp and smelling like wet pine, he dropped his tool belt on the counter and looked at her like he'd already read the storm in her eyes. "You okay? I heard your mother's in town." He paused. "She's asking around." Marla continued, "Asking about you." Jeremy sighed and leaned against the counter. "Let her ask. She's your mother. She's the reason I ran." Marla nodded slowly. "She won't take this quietly. Jeremy, if she finds out, she already suspects," he said flatly. "People have been whispering since week 2. Marla swallowed. "So what now?" He crossed the room, crouched beside her, and looked up into her eyes. "We don't let them decide for us." She closed her eyes for a moment. "That's easy for you to say. You're young. The world will forgive you. Me? They'll never let me forget." Jeremy reached up, took her hand. "Then we leave." Her eyes shot open. "What?" "We leave this place, start somewhere new, some small town where no one knows our names. I can't just disappear." "Then tell me what you want." He whispered, "Do you want me gone? Or do you want us to stop hiding?" She pulled her hand away gently. "I want not to feel this way. That's not the same." "No," she said, her voice cracking, "but it's all I have." That evening, the sound of tires crunching gravel reached the porch. Marla peered through the window and felt her heart sink. Jeremy's mother, tall, severe, shoulders squared with judgment, eyes sharp with suspicion. Marla stepped out first, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm here for my son," the woman said coldly, voice loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Where is he?" Jeremy appeared behind Marla, arms crossed, calm but firm. "I'm not going back with you. You're living in this situation," his mother snapped, eyes cutting to Marla like knives. "You don't even see how disgusting it is?" Jeremy didn't flinch. "I see more clearly than I ever did in your house. She's your aunt. She's the only person who ever let me choose who I want." The woman stepped forward, finger pointing at Marla. "You think you can keep him here? People talk. Marla, you'll be lucky if anyone in this town so much as looks at you again." "I know," Marla said softly. The woman turned to her son. "Get in the car." "No." Her face flushed deep red. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Jeremy said, "but I won't regret her." His mother turned on her heel, storming off the porch and down to her car. The engine roared, then vanished down the road. The house fell into silence again, just the sound of rain and their breathing. Marla sat down hard on the porch bench, her hands shaking. Jeremy joined her, quiet for a moment, then said, "You still want me to go?" "No," she whispered, "but maybe you should." He didn't move. "I'm not going to make you choose," she added, voice barely audible. "But if you stay, this will only get harder." Jeremy's hand found hers again. "I'm not afraid of hard anymore." And just like that, they sat through the storm together, even as the world outside waited to tear them apart. The storm passed by morning, but the tension remained. Marla woke to an empty bed. The space where Jeremy had slept was still warm, but his boots were gone from the floor. Panic rose in her chest for a brief, gut-sick moment, until she saw him through the kitchen window, stacking firewood near the shed like nothing had changed. When he returned, he brought in a bowl of steaming oatmeal and placed it in front of her the way he always did. "I thought you left," she admitted. I said I wouldn't, but you could have, after last night. Jeremy looked at her, his eyes tired but steady. I'm still here, Marla, if that scares you. I can sleep on the porch, or the barn, or leave if you ask me to. But I won't walk away just because it's hard. Marla didn't answer. She reached for the oatmeal and stirred it quietly. That afternoon, she visited the corner store for the first time in days. The clerk behind the counter gave her a look too long to be polite. Another woman at the register made a soft sound under her breath, something between a snort and a cough. But Marla heard it for what it was, judgment dressed in decency. On the walk back, she passed Mrs. Crawford and two other neighbors pruning roses along the fence line. They stopped talking when she approached. One of them asked, too sweetly, "Is your nephew still helping out around the house?" Marla offered a tight smile. "He is. Good boy," Mrs. Crawford muttered. "Just hope he knows when to move on." Marla didn't answer. She just kept walking, the plastic bag swinging lightly from her hand, the weight of every word pressing harder than what she carried. When she got home, Jeremy was fixing the back screen door. "They're talking," she said, setting the bag down on the table. "I know, they'll never stop." Jeremy stood slowly and wiped his hands on a rag. "Let them talk. I can't do this forever." Jeremy, living like a secret. He crossed the room and stood in front of her. "Then don't. Let's leave. And go where? Start over in some town where I have no name but plenty of shame?" Jeremy's voice softened. "It's not shame if it's truth. I love you." Marla shook her head, tears brimming. "You don't even know what that means yet." "I know what it means to stay," he said, "even when you try to push me away." She turned away from him, blinking fast, her throat tight. "I want to believe this is real," she said, "but every morning I wake up wondering if I'm the only one pretending it's not wrong." Jeremy stepped behind her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "You're not pretending, you're surviving." His voice cracked. "And so am I." They stood there, unmoving, until the tea kettle started to scream from the stove. She didn't go to it. Neither did he. Later that night, they sat on the porch again, side by side, not speaking. The air was thick and still. No breeze, no birds, only the hush that comes when something is waiting to break. Marla finally whispered, "If you leave, I won't stop you." Jeremy didn't move. "If I stay, will you keep me?" She didn't answer, but she reached for his hand in the dark, and didn't let go. The next morning, sunlight crept through the curtains in golden slats. For once, there was no rain, no wind, no storms pressing against the roof. The house was still, too still. Marla sat up slowly, the space beside her empty, the bedsheets already cooling. She walked to the kitchen, half expecting to see Jeremy stirring a pot or fixing something with his usual quiet focus. But the house was empty. On the table sat a folded piece of paper, lined notebook paper, corners worn, written in a messy but familiar hand. "Marla, I'm going into town to look for work. Not running, not hiding. I just want to make something of myself. So when I come back as someone you can hold your head up for. I'm not leaving you, I'm building something for us. Please don't cry, please don't wait in fear. I'll be back. Jeremy." She read the letter twice, then held it to her chest, her hands trembling. The house felt hollow without him. But it wasn't the empty kind of hollow she used to know. It was the kind that came with hope, a space carved out for something to grow. She spent the rest of the day moving slowly, cooking too much food, folding his clothes, touching the places he had lingered, doorways, chair backs, the garden fence still damp from last night's mist. The next day, and the one after that, she stayed quiet. The town didn't stop talking, but she didn't flinch anymore when they whispered. Let them. They hadn't seen the nights she cried herself to sleep before Jeremy came. They hadn't felt what it meant to be touched gently after years of being invisible. They didn't know what it cost to send someone away, not because you stopped loving them, but because you did. Weeks passed. The porch creaked more without his weight. The firewood pile shrank. The bed stayed cold on one side. Still, every morning, Marla swept the porch, tied her hair back, and looked out toward the road, waiting, hoping, not for forgiveness, not even for understanding, but for the promise in a young man's handwriting to return. One quiet evening, a summer wind stirred the trees. Somewhere in the distance, an engine approached, slow, steady, familiar. She didn't move right away, just held her breath. Then, barefoot and silent, she stepped out onto the porch, the screen door slapping shut behind her. And there he was, dust on his boots, a canvas bag over his shoulder, eyes tired, but shining. I got hired at the lumber yard, he said, grinning. She stared at him, unmoving. I brought my first paycheck. Thought I'd help fix the roof. Still, she said nothing. Then he stepped closer, set the bag down, and reached for her hand. I came back, like I promised, and in the fading light, beneath the humming of cicadas and the long hush of evening, Marla let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, love wasn't about right or wrong. Maybe it was about showing up and staying. Thank you for watching this story until the very end. Some emotions live in the silence between words, in the spaces we don't talk about, and sometimes that's where the deepest truths are found. If this story moved you, please consider liking, subscribing, and tapping the notification bell so you won't miss the next story from the heart. Until next time, take care of your thoughts, your feelings, and the parts of you that no one sees.